Recently, I shared something on Facebook that was received with a fair bit of backlash from some friends of mine. And these are people who I respect greatly and admire as Christians and people in ministry. But I just wanted to spend a little bit of time theologically unpacking why I believe what I believe on this particular topic. The topic in question is egalitarian versus complementarian. Are women allowed to be leaders in church? And as somebody who used to hold a fairly soft complementarian point of view, believing in an element of male headship within church leadership, my views have actually shifted after doing a fair bit of research and engaging with some key academics on the matter. So I just wanted to take a little bit of time out just to share my thoughts, dig deeper into the research that I've done, and just share exactly why I believe what I believe and why I would now take an egalitarian stance, which believes in men and women being able to hold equal footing when it comes to leadership in the church. So I'm going to tackle 4 of the key claims from the complementarian argument. And I'm going to purely look at a biblical theological point of view. I don't want to engage in cultural relevance and all of that kind of thing and allowing to eisegete culture into the biblical text. I want to do it from the opposite point of view and say, well, what do I believe that the Bible's actually saying at the time? And I want to look at 4 key arguments from the complementarian standpoint. I want to deal with those one by one, and hopefully this will be helpful for those watching. And the first one I want to look at is creation order and role distinction. A complementarian point of view would be in Genesis 2, Adam is created first and Eve is a helper suitable. And this order is interpreted as male headship. The other argument is 1 Corinthians 11:3, the head of every woman is man and the head of Christ is God. The second claim that I want to look at is the direct apostolic prohibitions. So in 1 Timothy 2:12-14, where it says, I do not permit a woman to teach or to assume authority over a man, linked both to creation and to the fall. 1 Corinthians 14:34-35, women should remain silent in the churches. And I want to have a look at that claim. The third claim I want to have a look at is a consistent pattern in Jesus' ministry in the early church. The complementarian view would say that Jesus chose 12 male apostles, and even though he valued included women like Mary Magdalene and Martha, there was no clear example in the New Testament of women serving as an elder or overseer. And then the final claim I want to look at is the functional authority in the church as being male only. Eldership and pastoral teaching roles modelled as male. So example 1 Timothy 3:1-7, husband of one wife. So I'm going to address each one of those as I go on, and I'm hoping that this short video will be helpful for you to understand biblically why I've come to the conclusion that I have. What I would also like to just caveat as I go into this in a little bit more detail, your views on women in leadership do not determine whether you are a Bible-loving, Christ-following Christian. This is what I would call a secondary open-handed issue where we can disagree, but we need to disagree well, don't we? So let me put forward my case and why I believe what I believe. After I've done the research, I've read John Piper, Wayne Grudem, D.A. Carson, who would hold a complementarian point of view. I've then looked at the likes of Linda Belleville and N.T. Wright, and particularly Gordon Fee, who hold an egalitarian point of view. And I've done the research looking at the theological perspectives whilst also digging deep into Scripture. And my mind was changed. So let's hope that you can understand why I believe what I believe. So let's have a look at our first claim. And our first claim is looking at creation order as male headship. The question posed is, Adam being created first, well, does that make him the boss? Does that make him head over women? Well, a complementarian argument would be that Adam was created first, so therefore men should lead. And they would cite Genesis 2 and 1 Corinthians 11:3, the head of every woman is the man. But here's the thing, Genesis 1 gives both male and female the same authority. It tells us that God created them in his image and said to them, rule over creation. Now, when God created them in his image, I don't believe that gives us a hierarchy. There's no hierarchy there. And the word helper in Genesis 2 is the Hebrew word ezer, which actually is used to describe God himself in Psalm 33:20. It means strength and support, not subordination. And then in 1 Corinthians 11, the word head, kephale, can mean source, not boss. What I believe Paul could be saying here is women came from man in creation, not man rules women. So from the very start, Scripture paints a picture of mutual partnership rather than male dominance. The second claim I want to have a look at is this. Does Paul ban women leaders? Paul says women can't teach, or does he? Complementarians would point out 1 Corinthians 2 verse 12, I do not permit a woman to teach or assume authority over men. Or 1 Corinthians 14:34, women should remain silent. But I believe when addressing those verses, the context at the time is key. In Ephesus, where Timothy ministered, false teaching was spreading, often among female converts. The rare Greek word Paul uses is authentian, likely means dominant or usurp, not simply lead. Paul's concern isn't women teaching, it's bad teaching. And in Corinth, Paul says women should be silent in chapter 14, but in chapter 11, just 3 pages earlier, he assumes women are praying and prophesying in the church. You see, Paul isn't contradicting himself, he's addressing specific disruptions, not creating universal bans. So when we read the verse in context, I believe that Paul affirms women teaching and leading as long as they handle the word faithfully. He's speaking to a specific cultural issue of dominance and control rather than women teaching altogether. The third thing I want to have a look at is, why did Jesus choose 12 men? Complementarians would say Jesus picked 12 male apostles, so church leadership must be male. But those 12 weren't about gender. They symbolized the 12 tribes of Israel. That's why they were all male. Beyond the 12, Jesus broke cultural rules consistently. He taught Mary of Bethany at his feet like a rabbi would teach a disciple. He revealed himself first to the Samaritan woman in John 4. And she actually became the first evangelist to her own town. And who did Jesus trust with the gospel proclamation? Mary Magdalene. Go and tell my brothers I am alive. You see, the resurrection, the center of our faith, was first preached by a woman. And that tells us that Jesus valued calling over cultural expectations. Jesus didn't center his ministry over around 12 men, but over a group of people who were gifted and called, who he discipled in different ways. Let's look at our fourth claim now. But aren't elders supposed to be male? Husband of one wife. Does that exclude women pastors? This is probably the one that I have the most, that I probably struggle with the most. Complementarians would point out 1 Timothy 3. Elders must be the husband of one wife. It sounds male only, right? But not necessarily. That phrase is about moral integrity. Literally, a one-woman man or a one-man woman. It's addressing polygamy, not restricting women in leadership. We see throughout the early church women holding key roles of responsibility. We see Phoebe in Romans 16:1 called a deacon and leader. The word for that is prostatis, and that's a leadership role. Junior in Romans 16:7 called outstanding among the apostles. You can't be outstanding among the apostles if you're not an apostle. Priscilla in Acts 18:26 taught Apollos, one of the earliest church's preachers and leaders. So you see, the New Testament never says women can't be elders. That's an assumption, not a command. You see, I believe very strongly that leadership in the kingdom is based on calling and character, not chromosomes. I believe that there's so much scope for great gifted women in leadership that we can't ignore what God is doing. So let's sum things up. So does the Bible support women in ministry? Well, let's zoom out. From Genesis to Revelation, the Bible shows a pattern of partnership, not patriarchy. God raises up Deborah as a judge. People have argued before to me, well, it all lies on this little verse because there was no qualified man available. Well, God being God, chose Deborah for that exact time and that purpose. God raised Deborah up as a judge. If God had to have a male leader, there would have been a male available at the time. Another time he sends Huldah to teach the law. We see with Jesus how he commissions Mary Magdalene with the resurrection hope and news. We see Paul in the New Testament celebrate Phoebe, Junia, Priscilla as leaders and teachers. In Acts 2, Peter quotes Joel, "In the last days I will pour out my spirit on sons and daughters." He goes on to say they will prophesy. So when the Spirit gifts someone, gender isn't the qualifier, calling is. God's mission has always been about men and women working side by side, carrying the gospel hope to a lost and dying world. I hope that's helped bring a little bit of clarity to my view and where I stand on this particular issue. But I want you to know, if you have a different view and you have come to a different conclusion, there's no condemnation in that. We can disagree on this issue and be loving, Christ-centered, Bible-based followers of Jesus in all that we do. I hope that's helped understand why I believe what I believe.